Alright, here we are with the latest episode of the Starski and Hutch for Torino build in 1/25th scale from Revell. Alright, first thing we're going to look at the engine. It got quite a bit more done since the last episode. We have the spark plugs wired up to the distributor. And speaking of the distributor, I've seen quite a few video reviews of this build, and quite a few of them state that the instructions are incorrect as to the placement of the intake. And I have seen other versions of the instructions for this kit, but this kit has the correct position of the intake in it. So at some point they did correct these instructions, and if you have a later kit, I'm sure you'll get it with the correct instructions. But it's just something to be aware of, that some of these kits out there may have the intake with the distributor facing toward the rear of the engine, when on Ford engines the distributor faces toward the front, which you can see on this build here. The distributor is facing toward the front of the engine. Now the distributor is made in a way that makes it very easy to drill holes for the spark plug wires, as if they made it specifically for people who like to detail, which I was very grateful, because it made it very easy to drill the holes into the distributor so that I could mount my wires. So I have the entire engine wired up. One thing that this kit didn't bring was a ignition module for an ignition coil, excuse me, for the distributor, and it did have the center post for that coil. So what I did was I created my own ignition coil using a piece of round sprue. Here you can see it. Let's see if we can give you a good look at it. Let's see if we can focus on that. There's the ignition coil there, and you can see the spark plug wire heading right into it, mounted in a position, as far as I can tell, is where the real coil is mounted on the real car. Now, I made the ignition coil by just taking a small piece of cutting the end off of a piece of round sprue, a little bit of paint, drill a hole in the center of it to insert the wire, and boom, instant ignition coil. Just another added detail. Now, this kit also has the floating power steering pump and floating alternator, which I really can't stand when they do that. There, as you can see, the power steering pump, which I haven't touched yet, has no brackets holding it. It's just being held on by the belt. What I'm doing is creating brackets. As you can see, I've already created the upper bracket for the alternator, and you can see how it is going to be attached to the front case of the engine to give the appearance of holding the alternator in place. Now I'm going to make a lower mount also that will attach to the lower part of the front case of the engine, and the same will be done for the power steering pump. Just adding a little more detail to this build, which is really ending up being a very nice build. The engine goes together very well. Everything just kind of fits perfectly. There's no slop in it. Very tight and precise fitment of the parts. Very well detailed, including a label for the oil filter, Autolite label, which is an actual Ford brand. So it does make a very good engine. I'm very happy with the amount of detail in this kit, and it seems like they went all out to really give you a good mold. The transmission assembly itself, where I've used the technique of shading it with 3 layers of paint, a base coat of Tamiya titanium silver with a dusting of Tamiya titanium gold, and then finally a dark shading of Tamiya bronze to give all the shadows on the transmission and give it an aged look, which I happen to really like. The exhaust manifolds are done in steel, Tamiya steel, and with a dusting of bronze and gold again. The engine is done in Tamiya sky blue, Tamiya X14, to try and replicate the Ford engine blue. The carburetors are done in Tamiya titanium silver with the individual parts of the carburetor highlighted with titanium gold, and then a wash of the Tamiya panel line paint. Here, let me see if we have one of the carburetors sitting right here. I'll give you a good look at it, so you can see the variations in color. Gives you a much more detailed look, much more visually interesting. That plus the spark plug wires from Model Car Garage really makes for a nice engine. Once I get the brackets finished for the alternator and the power steering pump, then I'll be happy with this. So that's pretty much it for this episode. The body is primed in pink to bring out the red a little bit more if I give it its color coat. I have to do a bit of sanding on it and a little bit of repair work to it. The chassis, from what I've seen, the floor pan of this car was painted red, similar to the body, with the chassis will be painted in black, and then the fuel pump detailed. So the project is moving right along. We have the interior already painted up and just waiting for detail. And it's coming along. Alright, well that'll be it for this episode. And I'll see you on the next one.